So let's quickly summarize what we have learned about user-defined functions. The first thing that we've seen is how to create a user-defined function. The way you create that is by using the def keyword. So this is the keyword, and then this is the name of the function. These are the parameters. And then this is the actual logic. You can do anything you want inside the function, and you return what you want to return. You can actually return more parameters as well. So every function has input parameters typically, but not necessarily, and an output parameter, again not mandatory, is used most of the time. And then there's this processing that happens inside the function. This is where the functionality of that function works. And the way to use this function is by just using the name of the function followed by the parameters. And whatever the function returns can be either printed out or stored in a variable. So that's what a function is and how to define it. The plain vanilla definition of a function. Now how about docstrings? When you create, so somebody who defines a function might understand what that function does, but somebody who is just trying to use that function might not understand in its entirety what that function does. So a quick way to provide documentation about a function is by using what is called as a docstring. A docstring is something that's enclosed in triple quotes at the beginning of the function. It could be of any length. In this case, it's 4 lines. It could be 100 lines, doesn't matter. What's interesting is how we are going to use this docstring. Each editor, in this case we have used JupyterLab, has a way to show this docstring when the function is being used. Visual Studio Code, you can use control space, and that gives the docstring. It's basically a pop-up that shows the entire docstring just like this. All right, and then we talked about arguments. Well, we have created 3 arguments, right? Balance, interest, the number of days. When you define a function like this, all these parameters are mandatory. You cannot not pass one of these arguments. In this case, it gives missing argument as an error. Also, you cannot change the order in which you send these documents. First, you got the balance, interest, and the number of days. So by definition, the function has been created with balance as the first parameter, interest as the second parameter, days as the third parameter, which means you cannot send days first and balance third. It will give you a wrong output. So the arguments need to be in order. Next, we have named arguments. Instead of saying interest, days, and balance, you can say interest equals 5, days equals 100, balance equals 1000. What this means is that if you don't send a value for interest, the default interest will be 5%. And the default number of days is 100 days. Now, why this is used? This is used because functions can get pretty complicated in any area, data science, data analysis, web development. Irrespective, the functions can be pretty complicated. And basically, if you want to default some values to make the life of the user simple, for example, if the interest is always 4%, why not just specify it as a default parameter, but still provide a way to calculate the interest amount if the interest rate varies, let's say 5%. So we are giving the flexibility to the user to calculate the interest on any percentage amount, but if the user does not specify it, there is a default interest value. A good example for this is the print statement. You see, by default, the separator is a space. When you specify 2 or 3 strings in a print statement, they're all separated by a blank space. Now, that's not the only separator. You can separate with a new line. You can separate with a tab. You can separate with a pipe character. You can separate with a comma. And when you want to do that, all you have to do is use the print statement with a separator of comma or whatever separator you want. And the last topic we have seen is the variable number of arguments. Number of arguments in a function is most of the time fixed. So there are 3 arguments, you specify the argument types. Sometimes you might want to give the flexibility to provide a variable number of arguments. N number of arguments. We have seen the example of how print function can take in n number of strings to be printed out. And that n number is user defined. The user can put in any number of strings. And we have created a simple function that shows you how to create a function that can take in a variable number of arguments. Alright, so we have seen built-in functions, and in the next chapters we're going to look at user-defined functions.